Deputy Commissioner Howell and Cheyenne Merrigan, who is the representative from the Bar Association. And we appreciate everyone being here today. I think we have had over 100 people who have signed up for this event, and so thankful for y'all's willingness to come out and hear from Deputy Commissioner Howell. As everybody knows, you know, our lives have been turned upside down since March or so of this year by the pandemic. It's affected us in so many different ways and lots of really negative ways. But, you know, I think that all of us, when we see some good ways and some silver linings, we try to focus on them. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing here today. You know, we're here today because you know, the workers' compensation bar has done a lot since March. And I really think the bar itself, all of us, the Industrial Commission, defense attorneys, plaintiffs' attorneys, everybody that's involved should be commended for how much work we've all done to keep all of these cases moving forward, serving, you know, injured workers, serving employers, serving insurance companies by being extraordinarily flexible. I remember in my practice doing a Zoom mediation, a video conference mediation within a few weeks of you know, this pandemic happening. And then it wasn't too long after that that the Industrial Commission worked very hard at putting together a plan to try cases and to move cases forward. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. Deputy Commissioner Kevin Howell is going to give a presentation on practical tips and pointers and considerations in a hearing. Deputy Commissioner Howell has been at the Industrial Commission since December of 2016. He previously was working in state government with the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. He was general counsel there in 2015 and 16. He had started in the Department of Health and Human Services back in 2013. Prior to that, he had his own practice doing both criminal defense and civil litigation since 2009. Deputy Commissioner Howell is from Garner. He's a graduate of North Carolina State University, which is certainly the finest university in the Triangle, being a graduate myself, and has his undergraduate degree in biological sciences and political science, and also graduated from law school at Campbell, where he was involved as a trial team member and staff writer with the Campbell Law Observer. So, you know, Deputy Commissioner Howell is known to a lot of us, tried cases in front of him, and we, you know, I know he does an excellent job there. And he was willing when the bar section came together and said, how can we support the community? How can we support the workers' comp folks out there practicing? One of the ways was, well, our practices has changed, and getting this information out to everybody was really important. And then we reached out to the Industrial Commission and Chair Bador and everybody down there has been super helpful and said, well, we're gonna give you the person who knows the most about this, and that's Deputy Commissioner Kevin Howell. So I'm gonna turn the floor over to him, and we'll take questions. You can put them in the question chat area. And when we get to the end of this, I'll read some questions out to him. We'll try to get everybody's questions answered. And again, thank you. So Deputy Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Barry. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the kind words. And while I give a brief introduction, I'm going to start sharing my screen. So bear with me. All right. And Cheyenne, can you see that? I can see you on the screen. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, looks great.
Excellent. Very good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Howell, and I'm a Deputy Commissioner serving in the Raleigh and Greenville regions currently, although I've made some appearances in the Charlotte region and Winston-Salem region. So I hope to have run across many of you in the past. And if I haven't, and you have any questions following today's presentation, you can feel free to email me. Now, I am going to cover a lot of ground. This presentation is going to cover some basics about Webex, Cisco Webex, and remote hearings for those of you who have not had a remote hearing yet. But it's also going to cover some practice tips for those of you who have. Now, a brief timeline of sort of where we came from. On March 13th, Chief Justice Beasley issued the first of several emergency directives aimed at reducing the spread of COVID-19. On May 21st, 2020, Chief Justice Beasley issued Emergency Directive Number 9, which directed that judicial officials make use of remote hearing technology to the greatest extent possible to limit in-person appearances. Now, consistent with Chief Justice Beasley's order, Chair Baddour announced that Deputy Commissioner hearings would resume in June 2020 via Cisco Webex. We took a brief pause. I think I'd finished some hearings at the end of March. So really about the middle of March. So I finished most of my March hearings, but for April and May and a good part of June, our hearings were pretty much at a standstill, and that did create a backlog. As of July 2020, however, and continuing until further notice, all deputy commissioner hearings are being docketed as WebEx hearings. Now, I know we all want to get back in the courtroom. I certainly do. But moving forward and until we really do make some headway with the COVID-19 pandemic, WebEx hearings is considered the default. All right. But we do have some good news. And as Barry said during the introduction, really the bar should be commended. Chair Baddour and Vice Chair Griffin should be commended in stepping up and getting WebEx implemented, because by the end of November, the DC section will have cleared our case backlog. That's great news. And, again, I want to commend you all with the bar for your patience, your flexibility, and cooperation in working with us. Now, sort of the first question that we usually get for those of you who have not had a hearing, what is needed to join a WebEx hearing? And quite frankly, it's really straightforward. You need a computer or a mobile device, which you're on right now, an internet or data connection, which again, you're on right now, and a camera. If you do not have a microphone, or if in the past you've had very poor audio for one reason or another, you can connect to audio via the telephone, your telephone. Just a quick note on that, we do require that everyone participate by video and audio, so participation by audio only is not permitted. Now, the second most frequently asked question that we get is, what has to be downloaded? I've never heard of Cisco WebEx before. What do I do? I'm going to touch on how to join with a computer. That's, I find, to be the easiest way, but Cisco WebEx is very flexible, and if you want to join by a smartphone or an iPad or some other similar device, you can do that. And there's a free WebEx application that must be downloaded for those mobile devices. There actually isn't a download required if you use a laptop or a laptop or a desktop computer, but your web browser does need to be updated, and Cisco WebEx does prompt you to do that. But this is actually optional, and I'll go into greater detail on those options in an upcoming slide. Now, I want to sort of jump ahead a little bit and tell you that the first practice tip that I can offer is to test your device before the hearing. WebEx actually has this website. It's webex.com/test-meeting.html. You can go to that. It will actually determine whether or not your computer is compatible. So if your web browser does need to be downloaded, or if you're doing it from your smartphone and you don't have the mobile app, it will actually prompt you to download those things and get you ready to go for a hearing. So my tip for the bar, my first tip for the bar, is to pass this information along to your witnesses, to go a day or two before the hearing yourself, and just make sure that you are familiar with WebEx and that your computer or your mobile device is compatible. Secondly, let me go ahead and mention a couple things. Most deputy commissioners are holding pretrial conferences via WebEx to ensure that practitioners are able to connect to the remote hearing. If you would like a WebEx pretrial conference and one hasn't been scheduled, feel free to contact the presiding deputy commissioner and request one. I know all the deputies have been very flexible in accommodating that request. And so if one maybe falls through the cracks, or if it's scheduled as a telephonic pretrial conference, just ask. And I feel confident that all of my fellow deputies would accommodate that request, assuming their schedule allows. And if you're still having issues connecting to WebEx, you've gone to this site, you've attempted to do a pretrial conference, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is going to be on the very last slide. I will attempt to help you, and I'll loop in our IT department as necessary. All right, so our next most frequently asked question really isn't about WebEx at all. The question is, whether in-person hearings are still available. And the answer is potentially, with an emphasis on maybe. There's no guarantee, but a party can request an in-person hearing by filing a motion with the presiding deputy commissioner. The party must show good cause as to why an in-person hearing should be allowed in light of Chief Justice Beasley's emergency directive. So, what is good cause? Well, generally speaking, a presiding deputy will weigh the need to limit face-to-face interactions against the factors that you present in your motion as to why a remote hearing should not be held. Now, in my opinion, the health and safety of those in a courtroom, as well as their families back home, is a very high bar to overcome. My practice tip here is to be very specific in your motion as to why a remote hearing cannot or should not be held. Now, the factor that I see most often cited, this was the factor that I saw very early on, was this sort of blanket statement about credibility. This is a case where plaintiff's credibility is at issue and you need to view him or her. A deputy in his or her discretion may find that reason, that sort of general statement, to be sufficient, right? I generally do not, because I believe WebEx adequately conveys a witness's demeanor as well as the tone of his or her voice when testifying. And those are very important factors to me that I look to when making a credibility determination, along with consistency of statements, including statements in medical records and to other coworkers and the like. Now, if an in-person hearing is allowed, our uniform pretrial order sets forth health and safety guidelines for everyone to follow. The UPTO was revised probably in July, August. It has changed a few times over the past few months, so make sure you're reading that periodically. Things do change from time to time, and so I would really encourage everyone to read the UPTO when they receive their docket every month. And I know it's kind of a lengthy document, and it's kind of a hard read. It can be a little dry, but you will notice from time to time that things change. And I've had some practitioners actually point to the UPTO to me in an argument on a particular issue. Usually it's an evidentiary issue. And I go back to the UPTO and I look at it and I say, wow, you're right. Your argument is being supported by the language in our pretrial order. So excellent work in those of you, for those of you who do that. But the guidelines, and I just want to give you sort of the Reader's Digest version. Anyone who has had symptoms of COVID-19, who's currently having symptoms of COVID-19, tested positive and not recovered, had known contact with a person who was COVID-19 positive, or has traveled internationally during the past 14 days shall not attend a hearing. Those are pretty straightforward and understandable requirements. If any of those factors occur with a practitioner or the plaintiff or any of the witnesses, just let the presiding deputy know by phone or email, and we will make alternative arrangements. We certainly understand and have been very flexible, as the bar has been very flexible with us as well. Some additional guidelines in the UPTO. We require everybody to practice good hand hygiene, to maintain 6 feet of social distancing in a courtroom, again, assuming that an in-person hearing has been allowed. We require folks to wear a face mask unless someone's in a courtroom who happens to be under the age of 2 or has a medical or behavioral condition that prevents the wearing of a mask. There are also some limitations on handling exhibits and approaching witnesses. In the interest of time, feel free to refer back to this slide. We can make it available following today's presentation. But also, again, another reminder, read the UPTO, because it really does provide excellent detail on those points. Now, we're still kind of on the subject of, is an in-person hearing available? What if a party cannot connect to WebEx? We've certainly got that question, usually from pro se plaintiffs, but we have received that question quite a bit. Now, that's certainly a factor that we will consider in determining whether good cause exists. But before I get there, I want to know whether other options exist. I've had several occasions where a plaintiff will testify from an attorney's office, or an insurance adjuster will testify using their mobile phone. Their work computer didn't have a camera or a microphone, but we got them connected through a smartphone. So I really do want to know, in a motion for an in-person hearing, if this is the reason, go a little bit further and tell me, whether there are other options that are reasonably available. I also had a hearing recently where pro se plaintiff was going to travel into plaintiff attorney's office, and the plaintiff actually was exposed to COVID. And so clearly, in this particular case, he didn't have the technology available, and it was not wise or appropriate for this witness, the plaintiff, to go to his attorney's office. So in that case, we continued the hearing, and again, we certainly understand that these situations are going to arise. One other point, and I was asked in preparing a presentation earlier, whether I've noticed that some pro se plaintiffs are claiming that technological issues to avoid having a hearing, such as on a Form 24 appeal. Now, I haven't picked up on that, but of course, that certainly doesn't mean that it's not happening. If you suspect that to be an issue, specify that in some form or fashion in a motion for an in-person hearing. And also remember, you can request a telephonic pretrial conference to be heard on that motion. So if the issue is I can't connect via Webex, you can file a motion for an in-person hearing and then sidestep this issue of whether or not somebody actually has a working computer or smartphone, but we can get them on the telephone for a pretrial conference. So keep that in mind. Now, if neither a remote hearing or an in-person hearing are appropriate, another option is a temporary removal. Simply file a motion, and of course this can be done by either party, to temporarily remove the case from the hearing docket. And if and when the case is removed, either party can get the matter back onto a hearing docket by filing a motion with the presiding deputy or providing notice to the clerk's office. A new Form 33 is not required, so the matter will get back on the docket fairly quickly. All right, now at this point, I'm going to walk you through the easiest way to join a Webex hearing. And for those of you who have already had Webex hearings, I apologize. I know you're going to be experts in this, but I assume that the audience is diverse enough that there may be a few folks who haven't had a Webex hearing yet. So I just want to go through this for their benefit. When the presiding deputy sets up a Webex hearing, all hearing participants must provide their name and email address to the deputy, and that's entered into Cisco Webex, their system. Webex then sends an email invitation to the hearing participants, which should look like the image on this slide. And simply from the email, click the join event icon. That link that you clicked on takes you directly to the hearing's landing page. So you do not have to enter in a meeting number or password. This is really the primary benefit of going directly from the email. It requires you, or excuse me, allows you to bypass some of those monotonous administrative tasks. Once you get to this page, enter your name and email address. For security purposes, that information must match the information provided to the presiding deputy, because basically, if you join as a panelist, you have some ability to influence the proceeding. You can mute and unmute yourself. You can join by video. Folks, and of course, I'll touch on this a little bit later, but folks who join as an attendee, meaning folks from the general public, they can only view the proceeding, but they can't really do anything to interfere. So for security purposes, you've been designated as a panelist, so your information must match. Once you enter that information in, click submit. That takes you to this page, which is a bit redundant, but you click join. And then if this is the first time that you have joined a hearing through Webex, that is, you'll see a page that looks like this. Now, the exact page that you see it will vary depending on the type of browser you use. So if you're using Firefox, which has actually worked really well with Cisco WebEx hearings, your page will look a little bit different. It'll be specific to Firefox. What this page is doing is prompting you to download an extension to make your browser compatible with WebEx. If for some reason you have trouble connecting, I do suggest that you try another browser. Again, Firefox has worked really well. Chrome has worked well too. Edge has done okay. I think we've probably run into the most problems with Internet Explorer, particularly older versions. And then I also have heard some feedback that Chromebooks, which, you know, again, it uses the Chrome browser, but there have been some issues with Chromebooks. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I would, if you have a Chromebook and that's your only device, you know, I would note that to the presiding deputy, and then we can try to work around that. So, you know, I mentioned that first arrow is attempting to download an extension to your browser, basically update your browser. If you don't want to do that for some reason, there is another option. Now, earlier I said, you know, that download is optional, and that's because you can click run a temporary application, and that allows you to join the hearing without permanently downloading something to your computer. Some people just don't want to do that, and that's okay. This that link is the second arrow at the bottom of the page. Personally, I would recommend that you go ahead and update your browser unless your IT department has advised you otherwise. This will allow you to join quicker and more seamlessly in the future. So you're almost ready to join the hearing, and this is what you see. It's a preview window that appears on your screen. Now, before you select the join meeting icon, I want you to do a couple things. The first, enable your camera, and that's identified by the arrow on this page. This will give you a preview of what will be on the screen for the entire world to see before you join a hearing. These hearings are open to the public, by the way. Second, you need to choose how you want to connect to the hearing's audio. Using your computer and internet connection for audio is one option. This is the default and is shown in the this drop-down menu that's highlighted with the blue box. Really, if you have the internet bandwidth for this, this is the better option. The audio quality is just better for some reason. And really, I think it's a syncing issue, but the audio quality is better if you can join to the audio through your internet. Whatever setting you choose, however, will be remembered when you join for future hearings. Now, if you can't join through your internet, there is another option. Typically what we see is, you know, in some cases there's been an echo or which is feedback, or maybe there's a poor internet connection and it distorts the hearing audio and sometimes the video as well. If that's happened to you in the past, you may want to consider using your telephone to connect to the hearing's audio. So when you select that menu at the bottom of the page, this pop-up menu appears. Simply enter your telephone number in the box beside call me, and WebEx will actually call you directly. It's a California number, so don't dismiss it because you think it's, you know, some kind of election campaign call. Do accept it. It's that's the way it's supposed to be. The call me option is actually better than the call in option. For some reason, again, we've just been told that the audio sync is better if WebEx calls you rather than you calling in. So that's my recommendation if you're going to use your telephone to connect to the hearing audio. One last thing before you join. If you are using your computer for audio, I recommend testing your speakers and microphone before joining the hearing. You do this by clicking this button on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. You will see a pop-up box appear. It looks like this. Click test for speaker. The sound, if assuming everything's working, the sound will, some music will play back to you. For your microphone, when you click test, it records your voice and then will play back to you afterwards. If you do not hear anything, make sure your speakers and microphone are unmuted. Okay, so first sort of troubleshooting step. If so, and you're still not hearing any sound, you can actually change your computer settings by, I lost my my laser pointer. All right, you can do that by actually clicking the arrows here in the drop-down menu and changing your settings there. And if that doesn't work, third and final step, you probably need to connect to the hearing audio by your telephone. But at least there are options, and Webex is pretty flexible that way. All right, so after you do that, you'll go back to this main screen and you'll click the Join Meeting button. When you join the hearing, Webex mutes your microphone to limit disruptions of people who join. So you will need to unmute once you're in the hearing, and that's why I didn't tell you to press that button there, which is the mute button for Webex, because whether you press it or not, when you join the hearing, it will mute you. So you'll need to unmute yourself when you join the hearing. All right, now that was for joining a Webex hearing on a computer. Joining on a mobile device is very similar. Very quickly, I'll run through this. You'll still join the event from your email. If you've not already downloaded the Webex app, you'll be prompted to do so from your device's app store. You'll select download and then open the app once it's installed through your app store. You'll need to re-enter your name, email address, and the meeting number, which is available through the email invitation that you received to join the hearing. And then you will need to allow Webex to access your camera and microphone on your telephone. After that, you can select join. And if you're worried about anything, you can always disable camera and microphone following the hearing, or just delete the app if you really want to. All right. I'm going to get into some practice tips now. And, I talked about whether or not you should connect to the audio through your computer, meaning your internet, or through your telephone. What if you choose one and something happens? Well, this is actually the most common issue that we see in a hearing. There can be several causes for it. And, I'm not going to go into that in great extent now, but if you are running into some issues, you can actually change your audio connection during the hearing. Practical advice, make sure you alert the deputy before doing so, because, sound will take a minute to kind of catch up to you. But it's fairly easy to do, and let me walk you through that. The first thing you'll do if you are in the hearing, you'll see these three dots here, those ellipses. You'll click on that at the bottom of the screen, and then this pop-up menu will appear, and you will choose Switch Audio. There's a second option. If for some reason you can't find, or you're not seeing the buttons at the bottom of the screen, you can go to the top of the page, click on Audio and Video, and also Switch Audio. That will then take you to this menu. And from here, you will, so the one on the left is if you're connected to the audio through your computer. Click disconnect and then enter your phone number, just like before. Very simple and straightforward. Webex then calls you. If you are connected to the audio through your telephone, you can simply go to that same screen and then hit switch down here. Now, I have had, I think the way I kind of describe it, you might be led to believe that calling in by a telephone may be more stable. I actually had a case where an attorney had connected through her cell phone, and about halfway through the direct exam of, I think it was an insurance adjuster. So this was defendant's direct. Plaintiff's counsel's cell phone, the call was dropped from her end. And so all I could see was hands waving, no sound. And, it was very interesting there for a few minutes. But with that said, I actually had her telephone number, so I called her, walked her through how to connect. But now you all know how to do this. It's very simple to reconnect your audio. You can either go back and have Webex dial you again, or you can switch to using your computer for audio. One thing that I want to talk about here, before I get to this slide here, is I personally recommend using a headset. You all see that I'm wearing one now. When we're talking about there being a fair number of audio feedback issues, I have found that it usually is resolved by buying one of these headsets. You can get them from retailers for as cheap as 30 bucks. The one I bought my son for his gaming system was about 30 bucks. So it really wasn't too expensive, and is fairly sophisticated for 30 bucks. There's some that are more sophisticated that run, 100, 120 bucks, but you can get a really good one for 30 to 50 bucks. And I've found that as long as you're in a room by yourself, other people aren't relying on your audio, that is the best way to go. Oh, I skipped ahead. So here's some practical tips that you should consider before you join a Webex hearing. Now, first, make sure that you're in a quiet space. Background noise will distort the hearing audio, and then that can affect the quality of the hearing transcript. That's something that we all want to avoid, particularly for deputies who then have to go back and rely on that transcript. But you as practitioners do as well, so that we all have a vested interest in that. Next, some people like to sit in front of a window, I guess to show us, their backyard or the view that they have while they're on vacation. That's fine. We all love great views, but the problem is that a bright light behind the speaker, the hearing participant that is, will obscure that person's face while on camera. So you really do need some overhead or front lighting that is brighter than the light that's behind you. So while we all want to know where you are while you're at the hearing, I really would consider just a bland background with some overhead lighting, and that would be more than sufficient. Next, make sure that what is on camera is appropriate. For attorneys, really this means removing confidential information and client files that could be in the camera's view. For your witnesses, make sure your dogs or your children are not in the room with you. I've had cats crawling on desks in hearings, and it's a bit distracting. I don't think it's going to affect my credibility determination, but it can be a bit distracting. Make sure that you have a strong internet connection. Now, to do so, you will probably, the most efficient way or effective way is to make sure that other devices that are usually connected to your internet have been disabled. So in my house, again, I have to make sure that my son's not playing Fortnite, which he really loves doing all the time. And if he's doing that, that's taking up internet bandwidth. And so I've got to kick him off and listen to the complaining for a few minutes, but it's for work purposes, so it's at least legit. You can also try directly connecting to your modem through an Ethernet cord. We're so used to just everything connecting wirelessly now that sometimes we forget that really is an option. That was how things used to be when I was growing up. You had to physically connect it, and you can still do that, surprisingly. Another option, which sounds more technical than it actually is, but you can change the channel on your router to actually get a stronger connection. You'll have less interference with your neighbors who are running Wi-Fi, and that will allow you to have a stronger and more stable connection. Another thing to consider is how you and your witnesses are dressed. Business attire is appropriate for attorneys. That's recommended for attorneys. I've seen some business casual, and that's fine too. I think we're kind of adjusting to the pandemic, but everyone else can appear in either business or business casual. Those are certainly fine. Now, you do not want to be this guy, who as it turns out, is a Brazilian judge who was getting ready in the morning. He had a morning proceeding of some sort. I'm not exactly sure what. And he started setting up this Zoom call and joined, and did not realize when he joined that his camera was turned on. So he appears in this proceeding shirtless. It made some news. He actually stood up, walked away, finished getting dressed, and then returned and found out that he was indeed on camera prior to him joining fully clothed. So we could call this a practical tip. This is probably a tip that's not just for the bar or for your witnesses, but would be for my fellow deputies as well. All right, some more practical tips before joining a hearing. We do recommend that folks join from a laptop or desktop computer. That does make it a little bit easier for folks to view the exhibits. But I know people have had success with iPads and the like, and so that's certainly fine. It's really a matter of personal preference. If you're going to use a desktop computer and your monitor doesn't have a built-in webcam, you're probably going to need to purchase one. Again, that's also inexpensive, but I touched on it before as well. I really do recommend that you all purchase a headset with a built-in microphone. We found that with the commission's laptops, when the fan is running, if you're not connected to a headset, it sounds like somebody's kind of taking fingers and running across a chalkboard. And not only is that quite annoying, it distorts the hearing audio and makes proceeding in a hearing quite unbearable. Okay, so some tips for considerations during a hearing. Participants who are not speaking should mute their microphones. Again, that's just going to avoid or eliminate any background noise. Sorry, I skipped ahead there. When testifying, a witness should be alone in a separate room. On that point, I've had several hearings where the Wi-Fi wasn't working for to run two separate hearings. So as long as there's no objections, most deputies are going to allow witnesses, a witness to testify in the same room as his or her attorney. But in either one of those circumstances, the witness should not have access to any documents or papers or refer to those unless and until they're prompted by the presiding deputy or the questioning attorney. When not testifying, parties can communicate fully and confidentially with their counsel. If they're in separate locations, that could be by text, email, or telephone. We as the deputies do turn off the chat feature because that's actually not confidential. We do get a hearing transcript after the hearing for any chat that did occur. And because I don't want to see that, that I don't want the potential that has to become a part of the record, we turn the chat off and don't allow that. An important point, and this was really a change to the UPTO, this first point here, is that stipulated and proposed exhibits must be filed 48 hours prior to the hearing. That requirement does not apply to any proposed exhibits that are contemplated exclusively for rebuttal, surrebuttal, or impeachment. So that's a little bit of a change than what you all may have been used to. Certainly, prior to March, folks were presenting step 2 at the hearing. But now the UPTO for the first time addresses exhibits contemplated for rebuttal, surrebuttal, and impeachment. And that's a change as well. So you've got 2 new points there that I want you to really focus on. Pretrial agreements, however, are still due no later than 10 days prior to the date of the hearing, unless you're otherwise ordered or there's an extension granted formally or informally. I know when I'm setting up my hearings, I usually give priority to the hearings where pretrial agreements were timely filed. So if I have too many cases to reach in one day, those who timely filed a pretrial agreement are going to get priority. If for some reason there's a difficulty, the parties are just at loggerheads or something like that, let us know. If one party is stalling, let us know. We will intercede as needed to help you resolve those issues. Now, still on the pretrial agreement, the party filing the hearing request is actually the one that's supposed to deliver the proposed pretrial agreement to the other parties 20 days prior to the date of the hearing. So if it's day 15 and you haven't gotten that, let the opposing party know, And then again, if you need to loop in the presiding deputy, you can do that as well. One other point, and this at first seemed to be, a concern amongst the bar, is that, can we even do remote hearings with interpreters? And the answer is yes. They've actually worked really well, as well. They're tedious, of course, but it's worked as well as they have in person. Again, know the rule, know your deadlines. If an interpreter is needed, follow Rule 619. That means you provide 21 days notice prior to the date of the hearing, which allows the deputy to schedule accordingly. Because again, we're scheduling these Webex hearings rather than just appearing in a courtroom and having a bunch of parties waiting around. We're actually having to schedule them. So giving us notice 21 days in advance allows us to make arrangements, but it also allows you all as the parties to make arrangements as well. Something to keep in mind, by law, our hearings are open to the public, and Webex actually makes it easier for members of the public to attend these proceedings. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a member of the general public will attend the hearing as what's known in Webex lingo as an attendee. So they will only be able to view. They will not be able to interfere in any way with the hearing. We at the commission actually post links to the Webex hearing on our website. You go to the remote hearing. Well, it's actually the Webex remote hearings link in the right-hand nav bar of our screen. And that takes you to a list of all the upcoming hearings. If you click on that, it takes you right in. Now, if a hearing participant inadvertently enters the hearing as an attendee, and that's happened because sometimes there'll be some technical issue and the person can't join as a participant, don't fret. The presiding deputy can then promote that person to be what's known as a panelist. That's the Webex lingo for the people who are actually participating in these hearings. Because the hearings are open to the public, we recommend that all witnesses have a copy of exhibits available to them, either electronically or hard copy. Now, again, it shouldn't be referring to them prior to being prompted, but we really do want the exhibits to be available to them, which prevents us or the presiding deputy from having to share our screen to display the records. We ran into some situations where we were realizing, wow, these medical records have Social Security numbers in them. So if I were to share this, the whole world potentially could see this individual Social Security number. So we want to avoid that. And the best way is for the witness to actually have the exhibits in front of him or her. It doesn't need to be a hard copy. If you're on a computer, maybe you have a second screen, then you can actually access them electronically. Just something to keep in mind. Not all witnesses will need all the exhibits. So if you have an employer, then certainly it would be appropriate for that employer to have the employee file. But as far as medical records, probably not required for them to have them. So just provide those witnesses. You can obviously determine which ones are necessary for which witness and then provide those accordingly. Logistical issues regarding the presentation of exhibits should really be discussed with the deputy prior to the hearing in the pretrial conference I mentioned earlier. Witness testimony. These are practical tips that aren't necessarily just for remote hearings, but we do know that remote hearings are taking longer. And so something to keep in mind more so with remote hearings, but if you have an important fact that's not in dispute, make a stipulated fact and put it in the pretrial agreement as a stipulation. I really, really appreciate when I see parties do things like summarize dates and types of medical treatment. I mean, usually in these claims, medical treatment at the very beginning is conservative and is usually the catalyst or the stepping stone to the more invasive treatment. So if you can stipulate to something like that, that helps us as the deputies, but more importantly, it helps you as practitioners actually establish basic facts rather than having to elicit testimony on those points. Attempt to avoid redundant presentation of evidence. Now, I often see, in this case, it's usually defense counsel. They have a list of questions that they prepared, which is great. I did that when I was litigating cases also. But if you've already established basic facts through the direct testimony, then you don't need to reestablish those on cross. That's just going to take a little bit longer during the hearing. And the longer we're in these hearings, the more likely something's going to happen. And, sort of my final point on this witness testimony is not every discrepancy requires impeachment. Again, of course, you can impeach your own witness, but if there's a discrepancy and it's minor, then, ask yourself, do I really need to show this witness a record on this? Can I just ask a question, or do I even need to ask a question? I mean, I've already established this fact. And so once the fact is established, then you can argue it in contention. So, something to keep in mind. Now, you may want to ask questions to see if you get a different answer. Maybe you get a third or a fourth or a fifth version of this story. That's fine. This is just the minor discrepancies that crop up with dates and facts that really aren't that consequential. All right, some final thoughts, and then we'll open this up to Q&A. Most DCs are holding just 2 to 3 hearings a day because we anticipate that these hearings will take longer. Now, I've had some hearings that only last 30 to 45 minutes, and I'm very thankful when that occurs. But if you have several witnesses or if you have an interpreter, we understand they're going to run long. There are also going to be technological issues that arise. That's Murphy's Law, and we do understand that that's going to happen. So if a hearing does get bogged down because, somebody's internet connection just keeps cutting in and out, feel free to make a motion to continue the hearing, to reconvene, or even, I would suggest potentially a post-hearing deposition might be another alternative as well. We all will just need to consider our options together, but understanding that these things will happen. All right, and so at the very beginning, my third and final point on this slide is that, I mentioned at the beginning, go to this site, webex.com/test.meeting.html, ensure your computer is compatible, pass this link along to your witnesses, make sure that they are doing this as well. That will avoid so many issues for people who join for the first time in particular. So that's pretty much it. I do want to thank you for the bar has been fantastic and so flexible and cooperative, and it's because of that the Industrial Commission was able to clear our backlog, and by the end of November we will be completely caught up, and it's thanks to you all that that's possible. If there have been any issues or you want to discuss, you want to maybe do a test run on WebEx, there's my email. Feel free to reach out to me. As my schedule allows, I will jump on, do a test session with you all. And, we want to make these a success. So I've kind of been informally, unofficially designated as the point person, or at least in the DC section. And so, I'm happy to help because we want all these cases to just keep moving. I mean, people are waiting on benefits or they're waiting on a resolution. And, we understand that the claimants deserve that. And we'll do anything we can to help you get through this.
Great. Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Howell. Your presentation was fantastic. Up until a minute or so ago, we only had one question. You did such a great job on answering everything, but we've gotten a few since then. I think that, so I'll just start from the first one. The first one, can attorneys record hearings?
Excellent question. And thank you for prompting that. The deputy should be, now I know there's been some times I've forgotten and maybe 5 minutes into the hearing I've hit the record button, but the hearings are to be recorded, And what I typically do in my hearings is when Webex sends me a link to the recording, I provide that to our person internally, and then I also provide it to both attorneys. One note on that, the transcript that Webex or Cisco automatically creates, when you go to the link, you'll notice it on the right-hand side of the page. It's filled with inaccuracies. So do not rely on that transcript. And keep in mind that while you do have the recording, that is not going to replace the written transcript that Graham Erlacher creates for the hearing. So don't cite to a timestamp in the video. You got to cite to a page like you always did. But yes, recordings are available, assuming somebody absent-minded like me actually hits the recording button.
And just a follow up in that. So the recording itself that's produced, you'll be able to forward it or download it as a video. I think in a hearing that I did, I was able to it just gave me a link at the end of the video where I could download it right there in the moment. Is that how that? I think that's how that works. Is that right?
So I'm not sure if you saw that as a practitioner. I do. It usually takes. So it depends on how long the hearing is. Surprisingly, for a 3 or 4 hour hearing, usually within an hour or so, I get a link to the video and audio of that hearing, and I get it emailed to me. And so again, as it's a matter of practice, I email that to the deputies.
Okay.
And some deputies may not be providing that link, but again, just feel free to reach out to them, and it shouldn't be a problem for that to be provided.
So, and like you said a minute ago, the transcript itself, that video doesn't act as the official transcript. The transcript is the Graham Erlacher transcript. But I think a question I had is that the video, is it going to be put into the Industrial Commission file in any way? And if so, is it something that the full commission will be considering in an appeal?
Not that I'm aware of. The reason why we're recording is to provide it to Graham Erlacher as a backup, in case audio cuts out on their end. So it's not part of the official record. That's my understanding. But it's a great resource to use if you notice a discrepancy in the Graham Erlacher transcript. There's always something that they transcribe differently than we said. Their mistakes are very minimal, of course. Graham Erlacher does a great job. Certainly. But if you do notice something, go back to the video and compare it, and then file a motion if that's appropriate, or we can actually go to Graham Erlacher and see if we can get the transcript revised. Well,
and my personal experience too is that having the video after the hearing actually is super helpful, because pre-COVID times, you were working from a written record, and you wouldn't always necessarily remember some of the things that you might have observed in the trial itself. And now you can go back and refresh everything right before you're working on your contentions. I think that actually be a real benefit to all of us.
When you get it so quickly, it comes in, you should probably have it within a day. And, sometimes we're waiting on a transcript for weeks. So it is a very helpful tool.
The next question comes from Christine Pratty. So she's asking about videos and evidence. Of course, Christine, if you're out there, I know it's a bunch of surveillance videos in your cases, and I'm just joking. But if she's asking if you have a video to enter into evidence, how would you get that uploaded to the commission? Because we don't think that the commission accepts videos in the EDFP.
So I have had them come in, or I've actually physically obtained them as a result of, or through a link. Some firms have the ability to actually host them online, and then I download them. What we can then do is share our screen. I think sharing screen on a video is going to be a little bit different and treated differently than medical records. But with that said, if for some reason I can't download it, the practicing attorney can actually share their screen as well. It requires a little bit more, technical steps, but nothing that's too difficult. I feel quite confident that everyone can do it. So we can play a video for everyone to see. and then we can obtain that video post-hearing if we, again, we can't get that link to it or the actual file, because some of these files are really large and they won't go through our email servers. But with that said, a DVD or a flash drive could be mailed post-hearing if we can't get it ahead of time. But videos are really no problem to share and view during a hearing.
So I think what a practitioner would do is they would just on their laptop or their desktop, whatever they're working from, they pull the video up and start playing it. But of course, sharing that screen to everyone that's involved, and that's just the way to get it onto the screen. And then after the hearing, it can be transmitted as a file, separate file, directly to the deputy or sent via a hard copy if necessary. That's basically what we're just.
Yep, no, that's a great summation.
Okay, good. It just helped me because it's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of changes we're all dealing with.
That's right.
So one of the other questions kind of ties back into the recording piece, asking whether in Webex the attorney or a panelist has their own option to record it from their end. I don't remember that, but is that an option for a panelist other than you?
It's not, I'm not aware of it being an option through Webex, but I'm sure there's some software that allows you to record your screen as you're, as you're online.
Right. Sure.
So that's not an option through Webex.
Right.
That's not to say it's not possible elsewhere.
Understood. But it sounds like that the recording, based on what your answer was before, is available. It's a matter of contacting the deputy and really making sure at the beginning that the record button gets mashed.
Exactly. And if that's a concern of somebody, I mean, it sounds like I'm not seeing the Q&A, but if this particular attorney is really interested in the recording, no deputy would take issue with somebody, a gentle reminder to hit
Sure.
the record button either before we go on the record or maybe, shortly after that introductory statement that we all make.
Okay. Another question along the lines of attendees. So, where people, the public can go in through the link on the Industrial Commission website. Who can see who those attendees are? Is it you, or is it everyone that's involved in the hearing? Who gets to know about who the attendees are?
So there are some settings that can be changed, but generally speaking, everyone who is designated as a panelist can see all of the attendees. So I found that that's helpful because an attorney may be aware that a witness may join, and for some reason it slipped my mind. And so, if they can view the attendees, they'll see, so-and-so's here as an attendee, Your Honor, can you promote them as a panelist? And it's very easy to do.
Okay. That question was from Heather Haney. The next question from Susan Vanderwert. How do you think that the remote environment will affect timeframes on opinion and awards coming out?
Well, that's an excellent question. And my personal experience is that some things have moved very quickly, but I'm definitely noticing kind of the bubble shifting from, cases waiting to be heard to now cases being heard and records are starting to close. So I know I've got kind of a glut of O&As that I'm going to need to be writing in the next couple months. So, when I have 6 or 7 O&As all ready to be written, it tends to take me, a little bit longer because I want to focus on one case, get it done, hopefully get it done right if the full commission will agree with me, or at least do it to the best of my ability. And so, that leaves everybody who's kind of waiting in that pipeline, just kind of, sitting on pins and needles. But, unfortunately, kind of, I think the next bubble that's popping up here is going to be in cases ready for decision. And it's going to take a little while for us to get through that. But sorry, my dog has fallen asleep and is barking beside me. But, in some cases, I've had expedited medical motions that have been heard, and I think it's actually sped up the process.
Yeah.
So the hope is once we kind of reach this state of equilibrium, that it will speed things up.
Well, and I think on the back end, the post-hearing stuff, the taking of the doctor's depositions, you know, the video conference taking of a doctor, whether it be Zoom or through some other source right now, seems to make things move along a little more quickly, because the scheduling of those depositions is just easier for everybody to attend, if that's appropriate. Not every case that I've worked with it makes sense to take a doctor's deposition via video and so on and so forth. But that can also make things happen a little more quickly.
On that note, with remote witnesses, you know, we've had plaintiffs who moved out of state, for example, or we have insurance adjusters in one part of the state, and there's, you know, usually a request to, occasionally there's a request to take that adjuster's testimony by a post-hearing deposition. Well, with Webex, there's no excuse. I mean, everybody can join so long as they have a computer or mobile device.
Got it. Good. I think the last question that we have on our list here is that, do you anticipate deputy commissioners reviewing the video, I think the video recordings, when making their credibility determinations and writing an opinion award?
It's certainly an option for a deputy. You know, I tend to take notes and make a credibility determination, you know, either during or after a hearing, you know, subject to change once I read arguments and compare with maybe other witness statements or medical records or things like that. Sure. If I was on the fence, absolutely, I would go back to the video and watch it and see, you know, because again, I really do rely a lot on demeanor, tone of voice, meaning the confidence in what they're saying. You know, in addition to just the consistency of what folks are saying to make those credibility determinations. So if I was on the fence, yeah, absolutely. That'd be a good option.
Well, I think that gets us through all the questions we had. I want to just say thank you, Your Honor, for all your time you've spent here over the last hour, giving everyone this information. We've had, you know, a large number of participants. I appreciate everybody's involvement. I'd just like to make and also thank again the Industrial Commission, Chair Bador, Vice Chair Griffin for their allowing your participation in this event. And after today, there'll be a video. This video will be available through the Industrial Commission's website. It'll also be available through the North Carolina Bar Association in the Workers' Comp section. I'd just like to make a plug for that. If you're not a member of the Workers' Comp section, you know, certainly think about it. It's a great group where we're having a meeting in a few weeks. And it's really been vibrant despite not being able to see each other. You know, that group is really a good group in the bar, because we've got both plaintiffs' attorneys, defense attorneys, all different kinds of folks involved, and it's a really place to come together. And even though we're not able to do it in person, we're working on events like this. And so just think about that if you will. And again, thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Barry, and thank you, Cheyenne, for setting this up. You guys have done a great job, and I find these types of events to be very helpful. I mean, we're all looking for outlets and things to do during these periods of prolonged isolation, and so, yeah, the workers' comp section would be a great avenue for folks to join if they haven't done so.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all take care, and we'll sign off. Have a good day.
Goodbye, everyone.